Hey everybody, it's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. Usually I talk to Nam on a Thursday, but it's Tuesday and the Cavaliers signed Kevin Love to an extension, so figured we'd start right there before we talk about the last home stretch of Twitter-free July. Kevin Love, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's kind of crazy how many different directions this offseason could go and how many kind of twists and turns we've had of thinking we're going to make all these moves to keep LeBron, whether or not we're going to keep LeBron, are we going to blow up, are we going to tank, what are we going to do? And I think if you would have told me a month ago that we were going to sign Kevin Love to an extension after LeBron left, it would have been like the least likely outcome, right?
Yeah, I think so. I just assumed, good, bad, or indifferent, that the plan would be to trade Kevin Love. I thought they were going to keep him to maximize his value. I never saw the extension coming, and I don't know that the extension limits them from trading him eventually, but I totally didn't see this coming.
No, me either. And I agree that it doesn't stop them from trading him, but they certainly are putting out the idea that this is to build around him, and he's going to be a cornerstone guy and a leader, and that stuff doesn't mean much, and it can all change quickly, but they're leaning into it maybe a little bit more than I expected. So, they seem somewhat genuine about it now, which is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, so the thing about it is that, on the one hand, I understand why people want them to try and keep their top 10 protected draft pick by not being particularly good. I understand. Even though I'm going to argue against it, I do understand the idea that you need to stink for a period of time to get enough top-level talent at the top of the draft. But I guess my argument to that is that there is no clear, obvious plan or path for the Cavaliers to get back to be championship contenders. There is none. The only time that they've challenged for a championship, basically in their entire history, is with LeBron James and a couple of other rare scenarios. So there is no game plan, and the league is constantly changing. Player empowerment. Player empowerment means that it's even less likely for the Cavaliers in the current environment. So I get why they might want to hold on to Kevin Love.
Yeah, and how hard is it to get another Kevin Love? We got lucky last time with Kyrie, but the odds of the Cavs drafting another player as good as Kevin Love in the next 5 or 10 years is pretty slim. So you can always tank. It's not hard to tank. You just trade everybody away and you're bad. Losing games isn't hard. We've had this argument with Sashi Brown for years now. Losing games, tearing things apart isn't hard. So if this doesn't work and they don't build around Kevin Love and get lucky and find a way to get another, top 20 player, then you can always tank down the road. But you can't always find another Kevin Love. So in that regard, I understand it. Why trade away a guy that is good, who's been there, who's been a team player, who wants to play in Cleveland, Ohio? I get the idea that we've got some young guys on this roster already. It's going to be hard to tank in the way that people want to tank just because we have so many young guys. And to tank, you're going to be ruining their growth as well. So, when you have Nance and Jetty and Sexton and all of these guys, if we re-sign Hood, it makes it difficult too. We already have enough around there that going full tank is almost difficult at this point. So go with what you've got. If it doesn't work, this is Cleveland. We know how to tank.
So are we just talking ourselves into this because we are Cavaliers fans and we don't want to watch the second coming of Luke Herringody running out there in a starting lineup for the Cavaliers?
Yeah, pretty much. If you asked me the way I would prefer they do it, I would probably prefer, to try to tank and get that superstar at the top of the draft and, get a couple of them after a couple of drafts. But in our entire Cavaliers fandom at this point has kind of found money because of 2016. So I think we're all just kind of okay with, at least the sentiment and the people I've talked to have been pretty okay with everything. It's, hey, Kev was part of that team that gave us the best summer ever. And if the worst case scenario is we get to watch him and some young guys and just be mediocre for a couple of years, that's still not a terrible situation.
Well, and it's one thing to be mediocre and have Jamario Moon and Mo Williams and guys like that on your team. It's another thing to be mediocre with Kevin Love plus Colin Sexton, Larry Nance, even Jordan Clarkson.
Yeah, we have like legit NBA players. I think that's the difference. When I think of tanking and the teams that are really awful, they're putting out rosters that people put out on Twitter as a joke because you can't even name any of those guys, or none of them actually belong in the NBA. And we have a roster full of enough guys who belong in the NBA that it's almost like we're skipping ahead a little bit. We can't really tank because the whole point of tanking is getting young players who you want to build around, and we already have some of those young players. So it'd be hard to take a step back at this point, right? Like, what would that do to Sexton and Jetty and Nance and those guys if you all of a sudden said, we're only going to try to win 20 games this year?
And on top of that, the Cavaliers already have some of these guys who could, I'm not saying they will, but who could be on the improvement track just in terms of their age and their their time in the league. Jetty Osman has probably not become the best player that he can possibly become. Same with Jordan Clarkson. There weren't a lot of guys like that. I mean, Christian Iyenga was here last time, and granted, he was young and he had some potential, but I think we saw where his ceiling was, and I think these guys already, 3 or 4 of them, already have a higher ceiling than anybody who was considered young on the team the last time that LeBron left, other than maybe, J.J. Hickson?
Right. Oh, for sure. Yeah, and if we're talking ourselves into the Kevin Love extension now, we really talked ourselves into J.J. Hickson. So, yes, I think that we have some guys who are legit NBA players and haven't reached their ceiling, and we can get more out of them by being decent. And the other thing is we're kind of testing the NBA tried to get rid of tanking by flattening the odds a little bit. They want teams to do what the Cavs are doing. The Cavs are trying to put out a decent team, and if they end up in the back half of the lottery and can jump up to a top 3 pick, that's the reward you get for actually trying to be decent. And we're kind of testing that theory that the NBA is pushing for. We should be the poster child for that, really, because we're still going to be a mediocre to bad mediocre team, and those are the teams that they want. People trying to be good, people trying to build around players and not tank and not create a bad culture. So with the new lottery odds, maybe we jump up, and maybe this is just as good of a method as tearing it down to nothing.
I think you have to do what feels best for your chances, and you live with what you did with your draft picks and your trades, and let the chips fall. If you're going to be an awful team, you'll keep the pick. If you're going to be a slightly better than average team and maybe even challenge for the 7th or 8th seed in the playoffs, then that's good for Colin Sexton. But this intentional badness, I think we've learned, I don't know if we've learned it, but it's my perception that intentional badness causes more damage than what you could ever achieve in terms of upside in the draft.
Oh, for sure. And, there's also just a point of it where if you're Dan Gilbert, you still won't be able to sell some tickets.
Well,
right?
He pre-sold tickets.
Right. And so, in a way, he's making good on that somewhat from what he can control. Or he is trying to put out a product that is worthwhile for the people who already paid for their tickets. And I'm not one to sit around and defend Dan Gilbert a ton, but if he's trying to win games, is that a bad thing now? I'm not going to sit here and get mad at the team for ponying up a big contract for a guy who, I love Kevin Love, but the back half of that contract might be a little bit ugly, and we're willing to pay it to put a decent product out in the court, and that's fun and that's exciting.
Yes. So I'm surprised. I thought maybe there would be some more arguments or whatever. But the problem is that I do see both sides. I'm a Cavs fan. This makes the Cavs a lot more interesting for me over the next, certainly this season and over the next 4 years. And I'm sorry, I can't believe that that's a bad thing.
And it seems, just from what little I read, which obviously without Twitter is a little bit more difficult than when I have that, but that a lot of the national writers and people like that think that we should have tanked and should have done that. And you can kind of tell how much the city fell in love with that 2016 team, because I think all of us kind of understand why tanking makes more sense, but we all also want to watch Kevin Love in a Cavs uniform for a couple more years and are willing to maybe take a harder path to relevance again to continue to have that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe the gap isn't that big, too. I mean, that might be part of it, where the difference between tanking and trying to go that route versus going this route changes the odds a couple percentage points. But it's not like one method is clearly going to work and the other's not.
No, and ultimately, this is the same team that drafted Dion Waiters, Anthony Bennett, and Tristan Thompson all in the top 5. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, and Tristan Thompson has been good. He was part of a championship team, but when you think of top 5 picks, you certainly think higher, or you dream bigger than Tristan Thompson.
Right. He only worked out because LeBron came back and he could fill a role.
Right. So, I don't know. I'm just interested by this conversation because I expected there to be some more argument in it.
And I do wonder how we feel in January if the team is bad. I will say this. I don't think people are discussing enough that there is a huge risk involved with this, where if Kev isn't the same player, if he keeps getting hurt, I mean, he's been hurt a lot in his career, it has a chance to be really ugly, where we tried to build a team that was halfway mediocre, built around him, and he's a guy who gets hurt a lot. So if he gets hurt, it's going to get ugly really quick. And that could be pretty bad.
It'll get ugly, but the tankers will get to keep their pick.
Very true.
And it's plausible deniability by Dan Gilbert and the Cavs that they were ever trying to tank, because obviously they weren't. Nobody can accuse them of tanking by signing Kevin Love.
It's just so wonderful in sports that we're sitting here like trying to defend the idea that the Cavs should re-sign their all-star player instead of trying to lose games.
Well, and this is a major problem for the NBA. It just, right now, I would bet any amount of money that I'd be willing to bet on the NBA, I would bet that amount of money that the NBA Finals are going to be the Warriors and the Celtics.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the same bet that everybody made about the Cavaliers and the Warriors. And it wasn't surprising. And if the entire league is focused on championship or bust, and the championship series is that predictable, then the whole thing is kind of a sham.
And I do think that makes it easier, too, to just not care as much, where it's easy to say you just want to watch Kevin Love be in the Cavs uniform and the Cavs be mediocre, because you know that they're not going to ever compete for what's going on at the top of the league, as long as Boston and Philly and Golden State are all doing what they're doing. It's not like we see some path to a championship and we're, can see how we could get to be on those guys' level. We can't, and we know that, and we've seen it up close and personal the last 2 finals. So it's easier to just want to watch guys that you like on your favorite team win a couple more games than if you traded them away.
So what do you make of the national writers who are always saying, everything's fine, TV ratings?
Yeah, I just don't think that's. I think we touched on this a little bit. I don't think judging solely based on the casual fan who tunes in for the playoffs is completely healthy. And I'll bring up the Indians in that. Baseball can do well during the playoffs, or ratings can be up, blah, blah, blah. But you're slowly killing the sport in the local markets. And at some point, those local markets are more important than the national TV contracts. Now, it takes a long time to get to that point. But at some point, that is the foundation of everything, that you have to have fans of these teams that support them. Because at some point, if that bottoms out, there just isn't going to, the TV revenue can't cover for that.
It's going to come crashing down at some point. I can't remember what the numbers are, but there are tens of millions of people who are going to do some form of cord cutting again this year, and those are the contracts, the monthly fees that prop up the regional sports networks that certainly fuel baseball and the NBA. So it'll be interesting. Obviously, the NFL is a little bit different because they can their national TV contracts can hand every owner $250 million without selling a ticket or a jersey or a hot dog. But I certainly think it's more impactful on sports like the NBA and Major League Baseball. Although maybe if they keep not allowing's the wrong word, but if they keep having the situation where it's almost a predetermined playoff outcome, maybe all that will matter is the national TV contract, and that'll continue to go, and that will be the natural transition. But it's hard to understand. It's almost like the regular season is almost like an exhibition season. It doesn't even really matter.
And as Cavs fans, we probably don't want to admit this. At least we didn't while it was happening. But the way the Cavs treated the regular season was more embarrassing than tanking or anything else that could possibly happen for the NBA, right?
As somebody who bought and paid for tickets, I agree.
They just didn't care. They just treated the regular season like it didn't matter at all. And not in the way of like just resting guys and being smart and trying weird lineups and playing younger guys. I mean, they just didn't care at all.
And they
Golden
didn't
State
even
was kind of the same
remotely
way.
hide their trip to Napa.
Right. And Golden State didn't try all that much either, if we're being honest.
No.
They didn't. They could easily win 70 games or something like that. But these teams aren't trying and still easily walking to the finals. And I would expect Golden State to treat this regular season pretty similarly, and we'll see what Boston does. But I think it's going to kind of be a problem where even if those playoff ratings are great, it's going to be hard to ramp people up for it because the regular seasons are just going to be so boring.
All right, so I mentioned the NFL, and I know you're not really a Browns guy, but I think we should cover Josh Gordon a little bit. I think it's a big enough story that even a Dolphins fan such as yourself is kind of probably somewhat engrossed in it.
Yeah, and I feel like I follow the Browns more than even some Browns fans. I mean, my wife's a Browns fan. I'd have to put up with all you guys all day on Slack, so I get enough Browns that I follow them.
So what did you... I wrote today that it just feels like the story's half told, and there's probably not much equity in having a hot take or a big opinion on it, maybe ever, but certainly right now.
I will say I've been through it a little bit with like Ricky Williams and Brandon Marshall, how I would say are... no two cases are the exact same, but the same general kind of feeling where you're always kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you want these guys to be healthy and get the help they need, and you're cheering for them, but you're also just a sports fan, want to watch your team win games, and so it's really hard to have them on your team because you can't count on them, and if they do have something bad happens, you have this weird emotion you have to go through where you're mad at them, but clearly you shouldn't be mad at somebody who's going through something terrible, right? So it is kind of hard as a fan to do this. I thought the whole announcement was odd. I thought it was odd how he kind of broke it. The Browns statement just seemed very like not wanting to attach themselves to anything he was saying. And then the Schefter tweet was like pretty clearly just copied and pasted from Gordon's agent, which was kind of odd too. So I kind of with you that I don't feel like we really have the story of what's happening.
Or what's not happening. You know, there very clearly is reporting that says that he's not failed the test and that he's not suspended currently. But then also they say it's a matter that they're going to address at the appropriate time, and that makes it sound like there's a matter.
Right. It's hard to think that this is just a, normally program that he was all planning on doing and everybody was aware, and this is no big deal. I mean, it pretty clearly came suddenly because you wouldn't have done it right before training camp, and the team would have been more prepared. It didn't feel like they were super prepared for this. I don't know if that was your opinion, if your thoughts were on it.
I don't think John Dorsey's going to be too afraid to cut ties when the moment is right or is appropriate. He's the guy who brought in Jarvis Landry. He's the guy who drafted Callaway. I just don't think where we've seen other groups kind of almost be afraid of their own shadow when it came to bold moves This is the guy who cut Kenny Britt the minute he was brought in. Like I just don't think, I actually do trust him with this process and decision, which is weird for me as a Browns fan.
Yeah, and I wonder if we will ever get the full story. Do you think Hard Knocks will be this? I mean, they obviously have to cover this. It's a huge story. So I wonder if we'll get more information then or how it'll work. But I do agree that they've got the infrastructure in place to not have to put up with this, where in past years maybe they didn't. And where they needed, talent like that, where they have the guys around them now to not feel as needed. But it's definitely odd, and it feels like there's a lot more going on. And like I said, you feel gross because if he's going through something that's horrible and on personal, you want him to get help, but we're sports fans and we just think of everything in sports land. So you have to think of it in the team. And it's just, if I were a Browns fan right now, I'd feel pretty scared of where this is going to go. It reminds me a little bit of Ricky Williams, failing a test or retiring a week before training camp to go. What did he do? Go live with monks for a while? Do you remember that whole news story?
Yeah.
And it
was like
has
a vow
little
of
feel
silence and
right, and it has that feel to it a little bit, where it's just he's going through some stuff. It's right before the season. They're ramping up. He's looking at what he's going to have to do for the year, and I'm guessing for any human that is when you start to have second thoughts, or you start to get a little bit anxious about things.
The one thing is that he never made the Ricky Williams money.
True. He doesn't have that safety net to just do what he wants to do and disappear if he wants to disappear.
All right, last but not least, we are about 1 week. One week from today will be the final day of being off Twitter for almost an entire month. How are you dealing?
I'm doing pretty well. I think I mentioned last night I'm checking my other social apps too much, so I'm spending more time on something stupid like Facebook, and so I think I'm going to delete those apps as well and just go the last week with no social apps whatsoever.
Whoa.
I need to get rid of the scroll completely, and I'm still doing a little bit of that, so I think I just have to get rid of all of it.
See, I thought maybe Facebook and Instagram would be different enough that they wouldn't pull you in the same way. I certainly check Instagram, and I've been putting more on Instagram since being off Twitter, but I don't find it to be the same toxic, argumentative place. Instagram never makes me feel bad the way Twitter used to.
No, I definitely agree with that. It's more just the time suck, where I'm sitting around staring at my phone, and I'm like, well, my kids are just over there playing. I'm just going to go play with them. This is dumb. Nothing on Facebook is more entertaining than this, or, steal away for 10 minutes at work to check something. It's like, well, I could just go get my stuff done and not do this. This isn't productive either. So I think just getting rid of that kind of time suck side of it is what I need at this point.
So are you going to come back? And if so, how are you going to try and set boundaries so that it's not toxic?
Oh, I'm definitely coming back. Dear Lord.
Well, and quite honestly, before you give your answer, I think that's totally fair. I believe that Twitter has become a place where certain types of content lives, and it only lives there. And it's a necessary part of being involved in the sports media, however we are involved in sports media. It's a necessary part of being part of the scene. It's just a matter of having limits on everything else. It's one thing to use it for the highlights, or to see the Woj bomb, or what Zach Lowe thinks of something big that happened, or sharing your own opinion on something big that has happened. It's another thing to scroll, argue, scroll, argue.
Yeah, and I think avoiding the kind of things that get you sucked into that. So, when I come back, I get sucked into doing stupid political tweets or retweets all the time. That can go away. I'm not convincing anybody to my side with some random retweet. I'm either preaching to the choir or somebody's tuning me out. That's not helping anything. So that's one that I think is quick. On every time somebody takes a shot at Cleveland or writes something stupid or negative and needing to rub it in their face or something like that.
If you haven't blocked Ben Mahler yet, you need to.
Right, and I realized one day that everything Chris Mannix tweeted, I was quote tweeting with something angry and getting lots of retweets from Cleveland fans, but like that's not healthy. It's not good or fun to be that guy, and that's the kind of stuff that I think I can avoid better. I don't get in too many huge long arguments anymore, but it's more just that kind of stuff where I think I'm changing the world with some tweet, and I can just back off and just be more passive about the way I use Twitter.
And so are you going to block off certain times like work, between when you're done with work and your kids go to bed? Because that's what one of the things that I'm going to do is, number one, I'm going to do this and delete the app every time I go on vacation. Number two, I'm going to work really hard just to tune it out completely at those obvious times, like from the time I get home from work till my kids go to bed, and maybe even after. But when I have something to promote, when there's an interesting story and I want to be involved in the chat room on the internet, I think it's cool. It just needs to be 15, 20 minutes at a time instead of 15, 20 minutes at a time, 7 times, 8 times a day.
Right. I think just not having my phone on me, I think is going to be a big one. Like put it on the charger when I get home from work and check it, periodically, but don't have it on me so that I'm tempted to scroll, and don't take it to meetings at work, or if I'm on a conference call, put it in a drawer or something like that, where it's away from any chance that you are going to pick up. Because I've noticed, I don't think, I wonder what's happening on Twitter. I just grab my phone and open it instinctually. Like I don't even think about the fact that I'm doing it. And I think just having a way, like this break is breaking that habit some, and so having it put just away from your hand, I think is just the biggest thing. Because I noticed that I just walk around with my phone in my hand all day, like waiting for some important thing to happen, and nothing important ever happens. I can put it down and enjoy myself.
So what does your wife think? She was kind of betting against you, or at least kind of goading you by betting against you publicly.
I still think she's a little bit annoyed because I don't know anything that's going on. I'm not sending her I'm not like, oh, did you see this happened? And we can't talk about like news stories. And this was a terrible news story apparently, but I didn't know it happened at all. It was like this duck boat thing. She was trying to talk to me about the duck boat the other day, and like from the outside, never having heard about this news story at all, I was just like, I have no concept of what a duck boat is. What are you talking about right now? And like, it almost has like pulled me out of pop culture and the current events so much that it's almost like the stuff that you normally sit down and talk about at the end of the day, I just don't have any concept of. So I do feel like it's almost annoying in that sense. But I'm definitely back and my head's not buried in my phone all the time, which is nice.
So overall, the annoying. Do you think she likes it better? I mean, I just wonder.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. What about in your house?
I don't know. I should probably ask my wife, but I think I've been so self-aware about it that I can't imagine that it's not better. There were times where I would be annoyed with something that was going on Twitter, and I would steal time away and be kind of short with them because I just had to write my next response.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm certainly not doing that anymore, which I think is really great. So,
is she on Twitter a lot?
No, she's on, but she's more of a reader. Most of the schools are on Twitter now. So since kindergarten, the kindergarten teacher was on Twitter posting pictures and stuff. But she's mostly on for that. Okay.
Yeah. See, my wife's on a decent amount, so I'm missing out on all the, funny things we used to send each other, like that kind of stuff. Like I do miss that a little bit. But in terms of, yes, I do the same thing where I'm engrossed in some argument on Twitter and ignoring what everybody's saying, and we're making plans or talking about something important, and I'm just completely not there. So I'm definitely more attentive now.
Well, that's good. So overall, it's been kind of fun.
Yes. Like I said, I'm going to go full social free, I think, for the last week.
Man. Now that's like laying down the gauntlet and challenging me.
I don't think I won't sign on. Like I might sign on to Facebook because everybody's just clamoring for pictures of me and my children, right? So I have to post them.
I like pictures of your children, and I think it's fun.
But I don't think I need it on my phone. I think that's the big thing. Is that might be one of those things that's great on your desktop once or twice a day, but that doesn't need to be on my phone. I don't need to be. Twitter is something that you need close by all the time. It's just the way it kind of works. But I think like Facebook and Instagram, I could do once or twice a day and get pretty much the same experience out of it.
Well, I think it's been worthwhile. I think it's been fun. I have found myself kind of sneaking back into Twitter to do certain things, things that I find acceptable and non-addictive. Like I wanted to post some of the comments from Waiting for Next Year to the WFNY CLE Twitter account today, and I logged in and retweeted the podcast that I did with Ben Axelrod last week, but then I was right back out, and I think it's been really I've been really good about changing my behavior. So I don't want to congratulate us too much, but I feel like we learned the lesson we were supposed to learn.
Yeah, for sure. Are you going to change anything? Like, are you going to unfollow a bunch of people, anything like that? Or are you pretty much just going to go back into what you were doing, but on a smaller scale?
I'm definitely going to mute more people. I'm probably going to mute anybody who's overly political. I just don't know that I can unfollow people because they'll see that, and I don't really want to get into that whole thing.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
But if I could start fresh, I would probably only follow 75 to 100 people.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm wishing, where it's almost like I wish I could go back in time and keep everything way smaller and on a smaller scale and just more refined. But that's also kind of the nature of what we do. I mean, we're big sports fans, which, you know, is a community, and you want to be part of that community and follow people back who you talk to all the time. And that makes it hard, especially, you know, we're writers for a site that has a lot of fans, and you want to interact with those people as much as possible. If people are reading what you're writing or listening to what you're saying, then you absolutely want to talk to them. So that makes it hard too. And that you don't want to lose those connections and those conversations, but that kind of is what leads to the negative side of everything too.
Have you ever considered deleting all your old tweets? Do you ever worry about what's in there?
I was thinking about that the other day. I thought about downloading like my old. You can download your archives, right, and just go through.
I did. I downloaded mine because I thought.
Did you find anything that you were overly embarrassed by? I'm obviously not going to ask you to read them or anything, but
no.
like, did you have to clean up anything?
There were a few more F-bombs in there than what I thought. But no, nothing like, especially with what happened to that reliever in the All-Star game and everything else. Like I searched all the dirty keywords. But it wasn't that bad.
I don't think mine would be bad. I had a personal blog for quite a while, kind of when Twitter was first getting going, and I lost the domain, so it's gone on the internet now. But I've always kind of wondered if I went back through that. I remember doing it once, pretty close to before it got erased, and there was a couple of things where I was just kind of like, I'm a much different person now than I was when I wrote that kind of a thing, and it's a little bit embarrassing and hard, but it's also kind of a learning experience.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Well, I think we covered it. I think we're good.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'll be interested to talk to you next week and see what your social free on your phone week was like.
I'm kind of excited for it. I might start even before the last week here. It's kind of. I heard you and Ben talking about this on that podcast and how he was saying he likes to challenge himself, and it has kind of been like that. It's. You feel kind of good about yourself if you're able to go a certain amount of time, you don't check anything, and you have that feeling of freedom that it's kind of hard to get with Twitter. You know, I think that has felt pretty good.
Well, yeah, I also like the personal challenge. I got really good at quitting things. So, what's next? I don't know. We'll have to find another challenge.
That's not a bad idea. Just like every month we find something.
What if our challenge was to write something every day?
Wow, listen.
Dude, I used to, in the early days of blogging and even the early days of Waiting for Next Year, I used to write at least one thing per day. Sometimes 2 or 3.
Yeah, like I said, when I had the personal blog, it was 5 days a week, not even a question for years.
Yeah.
Like, if I didn't have something up by like 11 a.m., I was like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? I'm a terrible person. And now it's
crazy.
like I sit in front of the blinking light in a Word document just freaking out anytime I try.
And, I've certainly slowed way down over the last probably 3 years, and I still have 3,513 posts waiting for next year.
Oh my God.
Which is crazy.
Right.
It's absolutely crazy. But anyway, I appreciate your time, sir. It was a good one. Thanks for jumping on a Tuesday.
Yeah, of course. We have 3 good sports teams right now. This is pretty exciting. There's 3 sports teams with good players.
Yeah, we really do. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.